Alright guys, hello and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video I want to make a guide concerning the building and loadout of ships, the different specialties of each race, and how you should or how you can optimize building your ships for specific purposes. Now, a thing to note about X4 is that every race has its own specialty, its own kind of flavor for its ships. For example, the Split is very good at hull points. They have very good hull. They can take a lot of damage without shields, without being destroyed. They also have a focus on up close and kind of shotgun action in their small and medium ships. Also, they're large ships, actually. The Rattlesnake's main weapons, the Rattlesnake being the destroyer of the Split, has very short range, but it can fire a lot of damage in a very short space. Contrary to this, for example, the Teladi, they focus more on shielding and kind of survivability of their ships. The Paranid, they focus on speed, and the Argon is a good mix of it all. So, in this video, I'm going to go through the differences and kind of general rules for deciding what kind of ship you should buy and what role that ship can have depending on the loadout. So let's start with the racial differences. So I am here in Split Space and let's have a look at their ships. So for the small selection, we have the Asp Raider, the Baller, by far the best small ship in the Split fleet, the Jaguar, and a small miner and a courier. Now basically couriers and scouts and small miners, they're not to call them useless. Couriers are nice to have if you're building a boarding fleet, but useful for little else. Scouts are nice and cheap if you want to just throw them out there and have them on the Explorer command. No one should buy this. The two most relevant ships here are the Baller and the Asp, and as I said, I prefer the Baller. But let us have a look here. So if we look at the bottom here, this is before we choose any components. These are the base stats of the ship. So you can see it can hold up to 2 crew, so that would be 1 pilot and 1 service crew, or a marine. It can hold 20 missiles, 50 deployables, and 4 countermeasures, or flares. It can hold 180 storage of container type. It has a radar range of 40 kilometers. I don't think there's a single ship in this game that does not have 40 kilometers, but I might be wrong. And it has a hull of 5.5K. Now, I would like you to take a note of this number, because as you can see, it can hold up to 3 engines. And if we select the all-around engine Mark II, you can see, for example, in the travel speed, it can go 3.6 meters per 3.6 thousand meters per second. Now, if we just take a quick jump over to the Aspirator, you can see it has much less hull. It can take much less damage, and it only has 2 engine slots. So this should be slower than the Baller because it is lighter. But what is this? It is about as quick. Why is that? It should be much slower. It only has 1/3 or 2/3 of the engine power of the Baller. Well, that is because it is lighter. The lighter a ship is, generally, times the slots for engines, it can go faster if it's lighter. So that is why, for example, ships like if we just take a little jump over to Paranid space, ships like the small Pegasus Vanguard, which only weighs 1300, if we kit that out with these travel engines, it can go very quick. Now, there is also some differences between the factions when it comes to the type of engines. For example, 3 all-around Mark III Paranid engines are not the same as all-around Mark III Split engines, but we'll get into that. So, what are the unique weapons that the Split can field? Well, basically it is the Tau Accelerator. If we have a look at, for example, the Teladi and their ship, they do not offer the Tau Accelerator. If we go over to the weapons, you can see there is no Tau Accelerator here. The Teladi, on the other hand, has the Muon Charger. But we'll get into that later. Let us explore the Split for now. So, the special weapon of the Split is the Tau Accelerator. Now, what does the Tau Accelerator do? Well, it has a very short range, only 2.1 kilometers, but the projectile moves very quick. So it's practically guaranteed to hit if you get within range. It can fire 3.5 rounds per second, and the damage is 524 megawatts against shields and 524 against hull. This is a very powerful weapon if you put it on a fast ship. And if we have a look at the Baller again, you can see if we kit it out with, for example, combat engines, it is a respectably fast ship. It's definitely not the quickest you can get, but it's respectably fast. Where the Baller kind of falls short, at least when it comes to the out-kitting you can do in Split stations, it comes to the shields. As you can see, you can only go up to a Mark II in shields, and Split shields are horrible. As you can see, it only gives a shield of 840 per shield modules, and this ship can only have one, which is laughably bad. If we again contrast this to the Teladi, if we take a look at their best small ship, the Buzzard Vanguard, and go over to the shield, you can see it can have 2 shields, and it goes up to Mark III. And the Mark III, only one Mark III, is nearly twice as good as the best the Split has to offer, and you can have 2 of them. This ship is severely more shielded and better equipped in that regard, but it has 1 less turret and 1 less engine to work with, so this ship will be slower. If we take the same combat engine, you can see this ship is pitifully slow. Now, the good thing about X4 is that you could, technically, buy a ship here, just kit it out with worst engines or shields possible, and buy the shields in Teladi space. This way you can kind of maximize your ships by buying the best components from each race. So that covers kind of small ships in the Split. So let's have a look at the medium ships. Now it's practically the same story here. Massive weapon arrays, just 1 engine slot for this one, but as you can see that doesn't really matter much, because compared to other ships, this ship is practically built for speed, so as you can see it's very, very quick. And as with the small engines, you can still put a thermal or a Tau Accelerator. And it is the same story. It has a bit longer range, a bit higher speed on the projectile, and much higher damage. This ship I would consider one of the best corvettes in the game. Definitely able to dish out a lot of damage. So that kind of covers the main weapons for small and medium ships, but what about turrets, you might ask? Well, turrets are practically the same between all the species. For example, the pulse lasers and the plasma and the beam and the bolt, every race are going to have those. Even the shard, every race are going to have these. And they're going to be exactly the same performance-wise as any other. Some races, though, have special turrets. Only some. In the Split's case, it's the flak cannon, which is a relatively good turret, but not as good, in my opinion, as, for example, the beam turret. But it's kind of it's kind of what the purpose of the turret is. For example, the beam turret, it will hit anything. The flak turret will hit nearly nothing. So if you're planning on fighting big and slow ships, go for the flak because it will do more damage, or even better, the plasma. If you actually want to hit small, flying, irritating ships, go for the beam. So that kind of covers that. So let's take a look at the big ship, the Split Field. And as you might imagine, it's practically the same story here. It has a large capacity for main battery, and the main weapons are fantastic. It does a ton of damage. It can fire often enough. It heats up kind of quick, but not faster than anything else, but the range is kind of low at 6.7 kilometers. If we contrast that to, say, for example, the Pyramid, Odysseus, in their main weapons, you can see they have a much larger range, but they can only field 2 main weapons. So the damage potential of the Rattlesnake is off the charts if you can just get it in range. So, and that's basically the story with the Split. Good hull, horrible, laughable shields, and for their engines they have high combat speed but low travel speed. And for their special weapons and main weapons, they have a focus on up close, big damage, burst damage. So that covers the Split. My recommendation, if you're going with Split ships, buy them as they are. They need the high combat speed, which Split engines are specialized for, but they do need better shielding. So take your ships from here over to Teladi space and equip them with Teladi shielding. So, and that brings us over to the Teladi. What is special about the Teladi? Well, as I said, they kind of focus on survivability. That is, they have a focus on shielding. Now, shields are rechargeable, you can get in and out of combat, and it's nice that way. Their engines are nicely balanced, though their ships tend to have weak engine potential. For example, if we take a look at their Scout, it has room for 2 engines, but even their Scout, it's not really fast, even with Mark III engines. Especially not when it comes to combat speed, which is kind of the Teladi's main weakness. What is their main strength is their shielding, which is exceptional. It is the best shielding in the game, and you should definitely get all your shields from the Teladi. When it comes to weapons, their special weapon is the Muon Charger, which, as you can see here, it's a relatively high damage, relatively slow firing, relatively quick, relatively low range weapon. It's not very good, but it is very cheap. And if we compare it to something that is similar, like say the plasma cannon, which is more expensive, it basically covers all the same areas, except the plasma cannon has a longer range. So that basically covers all the Teladi ships. Teladi ships in themselves aren't really good. The only thing that's good about the Teladi ships is when you get into their large ships and their freighters, which has very high container storage, so you can do a lot of trading with these bad boys. But in terms of combat and stuff like that, they're not really good. Their destroyer too it's not very good. It doesn't really have high survivability. They have 2 main weapon slots, and if we take a look at the main weapons, you know, they're decent, but not really good. So Yeah, that basically is. Yeah, that summarizes Teladi combat potential. They have great freighters, they have good miners, they have great shielding, everything else is horrible. So I would not go for Teladi ships as my combat fleet, but I would certainly go with Teladi shields, and depending on the use case, I would go for Teladi engines. So that moves us on to the Pyramid. Now, what does the Pyramid offer that is special? Well, first of all, in my humble opinion, the Ares is the best heavy fighter in the game, purely blueprint-wise. They strike such a nice balance in their ship blueprint. Like you can see, it has room for 3 shield generators, 4 turrets and 3 engines. It has relatively high hull, and equipped with Teladi shields, it will have very high shields, about as much shields as it has hull, so the Ares will be very survivable. But what does the Pyramid offer? Well, they offer mediocre shielding, as you can see. They offer 1.27k in shields for 1 Mark III shield generator. That's 300 less than the Teladi offers, so it's worse, but it's not horrible. As for their special weapon, they have the Blast Mortar. What does the Blast Mortar do? Well, it's basically a very slow shotgun. It's not very good. It has a high heat buildup, it's slow firing, the projectiles move relatively slowly. You end up missing more than you hit with that one. I vastly prefer the split shotgun, the Tau accelerator. But when it comes to blueprints, in my humble opinion, when it comes to small and even medium ships, like the Nemesis Sentinel, the Teladi has by far the best blueprints. The Nemesis Sentinel is probably the second best corvette in the game after the Split Dragon. And the Gorgon Sentinel is by far the best frigate type. It is wonderful. So let's move on to the large ships, and what kind of sets the large ships apart from the Pyramid side? Well, it's basically one thing and one thing only. It's speed. The Teladi large ships are very quick, especially on the travel speed front. It makes them very maneuverable in and out of combat, and you can make a very effective hit and run fleet with the Pyramid ships. Other than that, there aren't really anything special with the Pyramid ships. Their freighters have just fine hull capacity. For example, as I showed you, the Teladi freighter ship had 31,000 hull capacity. If we take a look at this freighter, it only have 25,000, so it's not as good. And that brings us over to the Argon. Now, what does the Argon have that is special? Well, if we take a look at their small ships first, you can see that they have 2 heavy fighters, the Eclipse Vanguard and the Quasar Vanguard. Usually, Argon ships will have large crew capacities. So that will mean if you get a high-level service crew on your ship, it will self-repair relatively quickly, which is, a good thing. But as I said in my intro, Argon ships tends to be balanced. They're kind of a mix between all the races. So if we take a look at the main weapons, what does the Argon offer that is special? Well, it's the Ion Blaster. What does the Ion Blaster do? It destroys shields and basically does nothing else. It's basically a huge ion cannon, which has its uses for specialized ships, which we are going to get into later, or pretty soon. But they have little use beyond that. If we take a look at their medium ships, you can see that they offer a frigate and a gunboat. Now, gunboats generally are just great anti-fighter ships, and they're pretty good at what they do. But that's basically all they do. It's fight fighters. So, kind of specialized ship there. They would be nice. They are nice ships to put in a group with carriers that doesn't really have the ability to defend themselves, or auxiliary ships that again doesn't really have the ability to defend themselves. But I don't really like gunboats. The Cerberus frigate is a good ship, but it's certainly not as good as the Gorgon Sentinel or Gorgon Vanguard, which the Paranid offers. What about large ships? What special do they offer here? Well, if we take a look at their main weapons, we can see that they have a good range, good speed, well, decent speed and decent damage. It's basically a good weapon, but it's not special in any way, like for example the Split main weapon is for their destroyer. And again, it only has 2 turret slots, which is unfortunate. So that kind of bring us full circle with the ships and back to the Split. So how would I build a ship that I would be specialized for different roles? Well, first we gotta define the roles. I would define roles as anti-fighter, anti-medium, and anti-large. So what would be best to fight fighters? I previously said that the gunboat is specialized for building fighters, and in theory it is. But in practice it doesn't really work out. The best ship against fighters is a Ares from the Paranid, equipped with these, I forgot the name, the Tau Accelerator Mark II from the Split. Those will destroy fighters, and they will be able to live to fight another day as well. The Ares with the Split Tau Accelerators are the best anti-fighters in the game, and they are absolutely unbeatable in that regard. Now, for anti-medium ships, I would say we have a larger selection of possibilities. For example, you could go medium ships yourselves. So if we go over to the Paranid Warfare, we select the medium ship and the Nemesis Sentinel, which is a good all-rounder with good survivability because they have room for 2 shield generators, unlike the Dragon from the Split. Do have 1 less turret slot though, but oh well. On this you could go for example, plasma cannons work fine against medium ships, but they're kind of too slow. They're better against anti-large, which we are going to get to. But I would equip this with also the Tau Accelerator Mark II medium type from the Split here, and they should be able to rip and tear, because as you can see the damage here is absolutely insane. The Tau Accelerator, easily the best anti-medium ship weapon in the game as well. And I would use either the Dragon if you focus less on survivability and pure damage output, and I would focus on the Nemesis Sentinel if you want to have a bit higher survivability. So that's the first option. The second option for anti-medium is to swarm them with smaller ships. And then I would also go back to the Ares here, and I would, instead of equipping them with Tau Accelerators, because you don't really want your small ships to get within range of a medium ship's main weapons, I would equip them with, and I'll show you, I would equip them with and this might be controversial, not here, I know they sell them in organ space. Where is it? It should be a, there should be a mass driver available. Mass driver. And now I can't find it anywhere. I know it's in the game. Man, I should have done more research. Mass driver, mass driver. Huh. Seems I can't find it. Alright, so you guys are just gonna have to take my word for it. The mass driver, I was sure you could buy it in the Oregon Federation shipyard. Let's just take a interceptor instead. Mass driver. No. Okay, so then I'll just explain it to you. If they removed it from the game, that's fine, but I want to explain anyway. So you get a couple of ships, maybe 3 or 4 small ships. You equip them with mass drivers, which are very, very long-range weapons that do decent damage, and you just select all your ships to attack the medium ship. They're usually going to hit because the AI is better at hitting medium ships with long-range weapons than at least I am as a player, and they will do massive amounts of damage from afar, and they will never be in danger of actually getting hurt. So that's the 2 options for anti-medium. Now, for anti-large, again I will present you with 2 options. The first option is very much like the last. You select either a Nemesis Sentinel or Vanguard or a Dragon. So either a Split and or Pyramid ship. You, of course, in all of these cases, you equip them with Teladi shields. And you equip the medium ship with, let me just pull up an example here. You equip them with plasma cannons on all the slots. So when we take the Dragon as an example here, you can see that the burst weapon output damage is almost 4.8k. And if we just take a look over at how a large ship will stack up to that, you can see it has 211,000 hull, but the Rattlesnake has the most hull of any destroyer, so don't take this as a, what could you call it, a representative number. But that means that it wouldn't take very long at all for even a very cheap medium-sized dragon to take down a Rattlesnake if it can get, for example, behind the engines here and blast it from behind, where it doesn't have good weapon coverage. Because it can do, I think the sustained damage was 2,000 something in the case of the plasma weapons. Let me see here. Sustained damage is 2.6k. So yeah, it should be able to take it out in about 1.5 minutes. Should be enough to take out a destroyer with this ship equipped as it is. And all you have to do is position it correctly, and it gets the job done. It's very efficient against large ships. To contrast that, we have the other option, which is to build a destroyer to destroy a destroyer. So, for example here, we can build a destroyer, and if we take a look at the weapons, we can equip it with 2, and just with these 2 main weapons, you can see we have a very similar sustained damage output. Now these weapons have very nice range of 10 kilometers, so you will be able to pepper the enemy from afar. What you have to be prepared to do if you're fighting another destroyer is that the enemy destroyer will turn around and start shooting you. So you want to make sure that you are prepared in terms of shielding, that you have the best shielding out of you two, because in a fight out, you're going to want that. A thing to note about destroyer versus destroyer combat. Enemy destroyers or AI control destroyers, so that means your destroyers as well, will not use strafing. They will not strafe incoming shots. Usually, because of the large distance destroyer fights often takes place, you can, even though it's a large and slow ship, strafe out of the way of enemy shots. So just keep that in mind. Make sure to buy good thrusters for your destroyers if you're choosing this path for anti-large. And that basically sums up my tutorial on how to configure the ship, what the differences between the races are, how you should go about it. To sum up quickly, Split, good at up close and personal fighting. Shields suck. Travel speed suck. Teladi, good shielding, good container storage for traders. Everything else sucks. Paranid, kind of good-ish shields and weapons and all of that. But what they're very good at is ship blueprints. They have the best ship blueprints overall. Argon, good mix of everything. If you just want to have one faction to grind relationship with to get access to blueprints and you want to be enemies with everyone else, make sure it's the Argon that's your friend. And that sums it up. You can also maximize your ships by buying the best shields from the Teladi, having the best blueprint from the Paranid, getting, say, the best combat speed engines from the Split, and doing that route. So, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.